This is Gilbert Andrew Garcia. Listen to my radio show, A Tip from Gilbert. Talk, inspiration, and prayer every Monday from 11 a.m. till noon on Houston's gospel leader, KWWJ. 1360 AM and streaming live on kwwj.org. Listen on the legendary KYOK 1140 AM and streaming live on kyokradio.org. KCOH 1380 AM on San Geek Radio 95.1 FM 1460 AM and Aliento Radio 101.7 FM and 1540 AM. Call in at 832-570-8075 and follow me on social media. See you then. All right, Houston, you have me, a tip from me. Talk, inspiration, and prayer. I'm Gilbert Garcia. Thank you, Houston, for joining us. And here we have I'm talking really a dear friend, but it's going to be a great show. Remember Ed Sullivan? We're going to get a really big show. We're going to have a really big show because I have Mr. Kambrel Marshall here. And Kambrel, welcome to the show. I've had you now, 2 or 3 times in my 3 years I'm doing this, and we always have a blast.
We always run out of time.
Isn't that the truth? Yeah. Well, first of all, I got to ask you the question that all of Houston wants to know.
I can't imagine what that is.
Well, you ready?
I'm ready.
How many bow ties do you have? That's what Houston wants to know, because everywhere you have a bow tie and you look just fantastic. How many bow ties do you have for real?
I have no idea anymore.
It's a lot.
Yeah, once upon a time I counted them, but now in retirement I really don't have a reason to wear them as much.
Is that right?
So
let's talk about retirement, because you've been retired now how long?
1 year and 3 months.
You know what? I don't know about you, but
2 months.
I look at you and I'm like, this man is way too young to be retired, because you're way too young to be retired.
Not really. You're right in one way. I think if I had been doing what I really love to do at KPRC, I might have continued to do it. But I was, for many, many years, I was just doing what the company kind of wanted me to do, as opposed to what I really felt I was blessed to do. So at that, I got to a point where I just kind of know. They always say, when it's time. Mm-hmm. And I'd always heard that from people, and I thought, okay, well, that sounds right. But I just knew at some point, I said, okay, I'm done.
Well, are you traveling? What are you, and your wife is young. Are y'all traveling? What are y'all doing?
As much as I can. My wife really is not a traveler. She doesn't like to travel very much, but I love it. So she's going with me, begrudgingly. Most of our travel, quite frankly, has been seeing our grandkids, who are in North Carolina and Maryland.
How many kids do you have, grandkids?
So we have 4.
Four grandkids.
We have one who just turned 22, one who is 15, one who is 5, and one who's 3.
You are a blessed man. You are a blessed man. Well, somehow I just look at you and I think you look so young. It's got to be in your genes or something. It's got to be, somewhere along the line. You got it going on.
My mother was 61 when she left us, but my father was 98.
98.
And his mom was 107.
Wow. That's like an institution, 107.
Yeah, it was great.
Yeah. Did you get a chance to sit with her and sort of near the later years of her golden age and, interview her to say, tell me about what it was like, life like during the Depression, or what was life like back then, or
That's
something?
One of my big regrets.
Yeah.
That I didn't get a chance to put her on tape. Now, I talked to her on a regular basis. I talked to her many years about life growing up and things like that. But that was just one-on-one with me and her having these conversations. I think as a result of her passing, when she did, I decided that I was going to do that with my father. So when my father turned 80, I sat him down here in Houston. He came to visit. We did an interview, and I did 2 more interview sessions with him in California when he was 80. And I said, we just had to get this on. So when he passed away, I had all of that on DVDs, and I gave them to all of our relatives.
Oh, what a wonderful thing.
From the very beginning of his life, talking about his life and what it was like growing up in the Deep South during the time when he grew up. He was born in 1919. So
wow, all the things he saw. We're going to come back to that. I did that one time with when you had VHF or one of those, and I did my Aunt Yaya. Everyone in the Latino community has an Aunt Yaya somewhere, right? And I did it with Aunt Yaya, and she must have been in her mid-80s at the time. And it was fascinating. It was like a time capsule.
How long ago was that?
It was about 20 years ago.
Okay.
And so we talked, and her mind was there, and we talked vividly about World War II. Mm-hmm. And she talked about how it was like, and they would get the coupons for sugar, rubber. They had to turn in all their gold. I mean, what it was like to really sacrifice.
Well, Daddy was 30-year Army. So
is that right?
He fought in World War II in North Africa and Italy in a segregated unit, and then he came back, and of course the military was integrated at some point. And he also went to Vietnam twice.
No kidding.
So, yeah. So he had a great, I say great, but very involved and informative story of his life as his kid growing up in segregated Arkansas, finding the military as a way to get out, even though it was segregated. And then later on, I mean, he's a guy who dropped out of school to go into the military, but he got his GED in the military, and he got 2 degrees before I got mine.
Holy cow! Yeah. My grandfather was a Marine, one of those, rough Latino guys, and fought in World War II. Mm-hmm. And you could strike a match on his hand. That type of guy. Yeah. And we would talk all about the service, and that was his way out of poverty. Yeah. To go into the Marine Corps.
Absolutely.
And the GI Bill and everything. It was because that was his way out of poverty.
That's exactly right. That's what my father was doing as well in Arkansas, where he was, his mom was a single. His dad died when he was 10 years old. And so, he was the man of the house. Yeah, he was pretty much, because his older brother, who was 2 years older, got stabbed to death. And so then it was just him and his 2 sisters and my grandmother. And so it was like, what am I going to do? So he went to the Army.
Wow. Yeah. We're going to talk a lot today about Sylvester Turner, Mayor Turner. But before we do that, I still want to talk a little bit more about this subject with you, which is, your family and so forth, and families and military service. Because when you say things like segregated unit, when we today are, going through our lives, we can't even imagine such a thing. And, when you got to say to yourself, what were they thinking? Because the enemy doesn't say, well, that's a black soldier, so I'm going to kill him more, or I'm going to kill him less. And I hate to use the word kill here on the radio, but you know what I mean? But I mean, why? I mean, everyone can carry a gun, whether it's, a white soldier, a black soldier, a brown soldier. What were they really thinking other than to be mean and hateful somehow?
Well, the history of this country is one that involves that as a part of our history. I mean, politically, some people want to say, well, we've never been a racist country. No, that's not true. We have been for many, many years. And so as a result of that, there was just no way that we're going to put these black soldiers with these white soldiers. We'll put the black guys on the ship, for example, but they're going to be the cooks down below, and the blacks could, transportation and all that kind of stuff. But that's the way our country was. I, as a 72-year-old guy who spent every year of my life, every summer of my life in Arkansas until I was 14, I experienced that firsthand, that challenge of going from Kansas, where everything was integrated, as we went across into Little Rock, and then had to get new tickets, and the tickets were automatically in the back of the train car. And then, for that summer we were there, we lived in that environment where if you want to go to the movie, we have to go to the balcony. You can't go below. You have to go to the colored water fountain or the colored bathroom. It was just, and so this is kind of off the topic a little bit, but I'm kind of experiencing a little PTSD right now with what's going on with the DEI stuff.
Yes.
It's like, okay, I'm sorry, Joint Chiefs of Staff guy, you're really qualified, but you're black, you got to go.
Yeah.
It's like, and so that's kind of gotten me out of my, you retired, Kambrel. Yes, but I'm not dead. I've got a voice, and I can speak up about some of these things that are really debilitating, and it's causing a lot of problems in the country.
I'm glad you are, because we need you. We need your voice. When you think about it, it's this whole DEI. For me, as a financial guy who's data driven, the data is clear that the more diverse you are, the more successful you are. And whether it's in financial services, whether it's in movies, music, sports, and it makes perfect sense, which is if you cast a broad net, you're going to get the best talent. And if you have a very narrow net, you're going to leave out a lot of talent out there.
Right.
And so I don't understand why people have this image of, DEI, that's got to be bad. No, it's the exact opposite. It's a competitive advantage for those who see it for what it truly is.
Well, that's one of the challenges we have right now with the hyper partisanship we have in our country, because one side has decided to say that, yeah, that's bad. They make it sound like because you're black, you were hired because you're black to a lower standard. No, you and your company would never hire somebody who's not qualified.
That's right.
You just said, I'm just expanding the net. I want to make sure I can have all these people. And so that's the positive mindset. You say you're data driven. Yep. Anybody who is data driven will know that.
That's right. And what's interesting is if you look at my life, and I'm just one of thousands of people, but our stories are similar. I would imagine when you're a young African American, or certainly when you're a young Hispanic, you had to be better then. You had to work harder then, your whole lives. And therefore, because you're, like my parents didn't go to college, those things, as I mentioned, I'm their retirement. Yeah. And, so the whole point is you appreciate things a little bit more than if you're anointed, if you're, fifth generation legacy of some sort. But no, we've had to be better than. And so if you look at our firm, we have a collection of people from different backgrounds, but there's one similarity. Everybody has had to work very hard to be where they are, and therefore they appreciate it, and therefore it brings out the best in all of them.
Your company is amazing that way. Every time I come here, I'm not, saying this because I'm sitting here on radio with you, but I look at this and I say, wow, man, you look at this, all these people are doing things. Your company is doing as well as it's doing because of that.
That's right.
You're not bringing in people, we're going to drop the quality and let you come in and do that. That's not the way it works.
We can't afford to do that, no. Drop the quality.
My grandparents, I'm the first one in my family not to be an educator. So I'm really fortunate in that regard that my grandfather and my grandmother and my mother were all educators and teachers. My grandfather was the principal of the colored school in Arkansas City, Arkansas, population 650. Wow. Taught 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th grades. My grandmother taught 7th and 8th grades, and my mother taught 2 grades as well. And because of that, an education of those, only 100 kids, by the way, from 1st grade through 12th. But because of that, that's why your cross got burned in my yard, because they were saying, you know what, you got to stop educating these kids, because it's always been the key. When you talked about the fact we talked about that you got to be better. My parents always said this. You got to be twice as good to even get acknowledged.
It's interesting how you said a burned cross, but you said it so nonchalantly. That had to have been terrifying. That had to have been like, you got to be super. That's terrible.
I changed. It took me many, many years to get over that, but I had to get over it because I didn't want to let that determine my trajectory in life.
Yeah, and your identity.
Of that. That's right.
Well, I was invited to speak at the whole, I forgot if it was 100-year anniversary of the Tulsa, where they burned down everything. And I did not really know that history. And then when they invited me, of course, I looked up the history and I'm like, holy cow.
Right. How do we miss that?
That's right. And, when people talk about critical race theory, it bothers me because I'm like, wait a minute, this is history and people need to know. And it's not about critical race. It happened. There were people who had their whole life trajectory of their next offspring, etc., ruined because they lost everything. They burned down theaters. They burned down businesses. And some of those businesses would have thrived and would have been some of the great hotels of America. Right. Who knows? And when I think about that, I'm like, holy cow. For those of you who don't know what I'm talking about, there was a thriving part of Tulsa where it was an African-American part of the city. And it was thriving. Yep. And it was like I think they call it like the Black Wall Street.
Black Wall Street.
Because they had entrepreneurs, they had artists, they had theaters, they had hotels, and they all, supported each other. And it was all burned down, and it was done prematurely I forgot who said something about something. They went and burned it down. And they burned it down.
They bombed. They bombed. They actually, somebody got it with a plane and they dropped some bombs.
Come on.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable when we hear those stories.
And I didn't hear that story as a kid growing up. That wasn't part of my history either. And that's because it all comes out to who's writing the history and who's
to the victors goes to the spoils, as they say.
They're the ones who write the history.
Yep.
And so there are many, many times throughout history, whether it's in Africa and Europe, there's history that's been written by the conquerors, and they're not going to be positive toward the people who got conquered, no matter what kind of contributions they made.
Isn't that amazing?
It is amazing.
Well, you know what? We've got to keep talking about it.
Yeah.
We've got to keep those stories alive, if nothing else, verbally, until more sanity comes around here.
Yeah.
And therefore, we can really talk about it in schools. But we've got to keep the stories alive.
It's an ongoing challenge. One of the things that I'm doing now in retirement, I'm doing a lot more reading than I've ever done before. And the challenge is, of course, to have these conversations without any, rancor about it, to say, look, this happened. This doesn't say little Johnny or little Susie, your grandfather, that your parents are responsible for what's going on right now. But somebody back a couple of generations ago would hang black people in Texas for sport.
That's right.
And we have pictures of it. So it happened. And these things happened. Whole cities, there were communities within the state of Texas that were done away with because of, white people who were, upset about things. And it happened. It's a part of our history. And it doesn't mean that the people right now are responsible for that or they're evil right now. But it happened then. And the fact that there are people who don't want to have it even talked about in our history books is a problem.
I saw something last night, and I kept the article because I want to read it completely, where they're taking out a whole host of words out of government documents. And it's unbelievable. It's kind of like, wait a minute, we're going backwards. All these words, and they're words that should be part of our daily lives. And it's like, why are they threatened by the word racism? Why is that a threat?
Or the word gay. Did you read about that? The Enola Gay?
Yeah. Oh,
the Enola Gay, the bomber that dropped the bomb over Hiroshima. They took that out of something because it was the word gay was there.
So now it's going to be called the Enola.
I think they put it back in because it's like, okay, that's kind of ridiculous. But
it is the name.
Well, also they were, getting away with they couldn't discuss the history of the Tuskegee Airmen. They were taking that out, and there was a big pushback by whites and blacks about that. Wait a minute, that's a big part of our country's history. Well, it's all part of our country's history, and
we should honor those bombers, those pilots, because they gave their lives for this country, and they were some of the best. That's a wonderful story.
They went back. I think they reneged. I mean, they took that back and said, okay, you can talk about it now.
Amen to that. One thing I would have mentioned, because you said you had we're just going rapid fire here. I hope you don't mind. Because,
okay.
I mean, this is good. This is good. But this is what it's meant to be.
Well, we're always rapid fire when we're together. So.
I'm telling you. So, you talked about there's always been educators in your family. And we are going to talk about Sylvester Turner because I want to talk about his glorious life and celebrate that. But they were all educators in your family. So what made you go into broadcasting? I mean, where did you turn off the course there? And of course, it turned out to be a wonderful thing. But that had to take courage, because I'm sure everybody's like, well, you got to be a teacher. Well, what made you go in that route?
It was by accident in a lot of ways. I mean, I knew that I didn't have the patience or stamina to be a teacher, because teachers are amazing. They are absolutely the things that teachers have responsibility for that parents sometimes forget. It's just amazing what because look, all these kids have different levels of learning they have to go ahead, and the teacher's responsible for getting them from point A to point B. It's amazing what they do. I used to watch my mother. She would put together lesson plans and stuff like that. My mother initially, she was a teacher, but when I was in high school, she was a counselor. So she was a counselor. So she would work with these students to get them to graduate. Then my sister became a music teacher, still is teaching now. 52 years she's been teaching.
Oh, amen.
And so when I got ready to go to college, Vietnam was going on. And so it was like, okay, if I'm going to get drafted, I want to avoid the draft. I want to be able to go as an officer. So I applied for an ROTC scholarship. So I got a 4-year ROTC scholarship to go to Arizona State University, which at that time was a conservative state, still is. And that meant that I didn't have to walk over protesters to go to my classes, my ROTC classes. That was my thought process. So that's why I went away from education to go into the military as an officer, to avoid the draft to get me as an enlisted. So in other words, if I'm going to go in the military, I want to go as an officer.
Right.
And the problem was I wanted to go into the Navy, in the Navy and or the Marines, but the Navy wouldn't take me because my left eye could not be corrected to 20/20 vision. And so it's like, what? Are you kidding me? Now, they would take me as an enlisted guy, but they wouldn't take me as an officer because they wanted to be able to have me fly. And if they wanted to have me fly, they wanted to have me have 20/20 vision. So I went into the ROTC, but I realized, man, I saw all the politics within the military, even in the college level. So yeah, I don't want to do this. And that's when I decided that I would go into broadcasting, because I realized that I could do the kinds of things that my mother was doing. She was a social worker as well, call attention to the ills of society as a journalist, and then be able to do that. So as a tribute to my mom, I said, this is what I want to do, because I've always been a mama's boy.
Yeah.
So.
Amen. Well, aren't we all? Well, not all of us, but I understand.
I admit it, though.
Yeah. I have to say it. Well, Mom, I love you out there. You know that I do, Mom. Well, my mom's still with us.
That's a good thing.
So let's go back for a second, because people will often tell me, God, Gilbert, you manage 24 billion. We're over 24 billion now. You manage 24 billion, and with all the stuff going on in the market, God, that sounds so stressful. And I thought about that, and I'm thinking, but this is what I'm like trained to do. And so it doesn't seem stressful to me. And what seems stressful to me is if I were like a kindergarten teacher with, 20 kids and they're all they're all around, and someone's got a diaper change necessary, and somebody's crying in the corner, someone's asleep, someone's doing something. I mean, that would be stressful.
Right. But look at their eyes, because they're like sponges. Yeah. They take all this stuff in. So as a teacher, they've got to be that initial sponge. And I'm still on the board of the Collaborative for Children, which is focused on children's educational kinds of things between ages of birth and 5 years old. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's where all the development goes on. So if we can put more structures into place to get these kids learning at a level that's positive, that's a good thing. That's addition to what the teachers are doing. I could not do what they do every day.
And what's going on too is I had a friend of mine that's a teacher, and in the Dallas area, and she has to buy the school supplies for her kids. And I thought to myself, what do you mean you got to pay for the? Yeah. She was doing a thing like a GoFundMe, and she says, will you give money to my school supplies? I said, well, sure. I said, but don't you get school supplies? And she just said, no, we don't get, we've got to do our own. I thought, holy cow, what is happening to our schools? Yeah. If we don't give the teachers, first of all, we don't pay them enough. We all know those things. But if we're not even giving them the tools that they need to do the job for us and our kids, oh my God, shame.
And that's become political too. The governor wants to get all these vouchers in place, I mean, that's a political football. Rice had done some programs and some studies on what's going on and how many school districts in Texas are underfunded. And they wanted to get the state to say, well, let's fund these districts, let them do what they can do. But the priority is not funding all the districts. The priority right now is to get these vouchers in place, which is a political football, however you feel about it.
Well, talk about political football. We have a caller. We had another caller who dropped, but I think he'll come back. But we now have a Representative Ron Reynolds. Representative, are you there?
I'm here. Good morning. Good morning.
You got me, Gilbert Garcia with Kambrel Marshall, and Representative. We were just talking about, all the different things going on in Austin. I happen to see a clip somewhere of you there introducing some of the members of the fraternity to the.
Yes.
I saw that. You sounded great, my friend. What is going on in the House, and what are the big issues? And boy, I mean, we need you there, Representative.
Well, thank you, Gilbert, and I want to always thank you for your show, a tremendous platform for our community. And I want to welcome my church mate, Kambrel Marshall,
there you go.
A wonderful leader, dynamic person in our city. And I want to say this first, Gilbert. Kambrel and I both were members of the Church Without Walls. There was no more dedicated member of our church than former state representative, former mayor, former Congressman Sylvester Turner. He was devoted.
Yep.
He didn't just show up at church to be seen. He was there to worship. He was a dynamic person. And I'll share this real quick. I'll never forget, Kambrel, one Father's Day. Hello?
We got you. Keep going.
Okay. One Father's Day, the Pastor West had 3 people speaking. One was Kambrel Marshall, the other was Sylvester Turner, and the other one was myself. And I was like, how can I join these 2 guys in speaking? We were both at different services talking about Father's Day. Kambrel, you remember that?
I do.
And I remember thinking, Lord, I'm so happy I don't have to go behind either Kambrel or Sylvester. They put me over the small satellite location. But I love the fact that both of you are always so supportive of Sylvester. He's going to be tremendously missed. He was such an amazing public servant, a wonderful humanitarian, someone who devoted his life to public service. And I do thank you both for, sharing great memories of him. And Gilbert, to answer your question, there's so much going on in Austin right now. And I'll just tell you quickly, people should be engaged. They should be paying attention, not just what's happening in D.C. at the nation's capital, but right here locally in Austin at the state capitol, because all politics is local. Tomorrow in the Public Education Committee, there will be a hearing on school vouchers. We've heard so much about it. I think it's terrible for our public schools. I think it's wrong for many of us to support a scam that only supports wealthy families subsidizing their child's tuition to private school on the backs of public dollars, and to the detriment of our neighborhood public schools. So I hope that people will pay attention to what's happening. That is happening tomorrow in the Public Education Committee. People can come and testify against it or for it if you're for it. This is the people's house. We'll also be discussing property tax reform. So many people are feeling the pinch of rising property taxes, and it's pricing people out of homes. They can afford the mortgage, but they can't afford the property taxes. So we're trying to address that.
Well,
there's so many.
Hold on, you said so many important. I want to unbundle some of these if you don't mind. And we want you to stay with us for a minute. So let's go back to something. The vouchers for our listeners. Is there a means test? Like if you have so much money, you're not eligible for a voucher, even if your child goes to public schools. If you make some above some threshold, is there a means test?
Right now, there are different proposals, but the one that has the legs doesn't have a means test. So I would say to you right now, the likelihood of a means test is unlikely. If we had a voucher that had accountability, like all of our public schools, they have to take children with disabilities and they can't deny students because of whatever reason. Private schools, they can say no. So and again, this is all proposed. There's nothing final yet. That's why people should weigh in.
Well, the other thing that's amazing, I didn't mean to cut you off there, Representative, is if you look at some of the rural areas, it's amazing to me that rural representatives might support this, when if you look, the very bedrock of a lot of these rural communities is the public school system. It's one of the biggest employers. It's one of the biggest. It's one of the biggest areas to launch to go to college. It is so much different than in Houston because it's all they have in these small cities. And so
that's right.
It's amazing to me that they would support it. What's behind that?
Well, I'll tell you what's behind it. Well, what's missing is partisan politics. Governor Abbott went after the rural Republicans last election primary. They had the audacity to vote for their district. He went after them with millions of dollars in negative campaign ads and got most of them defeated. You're absolutely right. In rural areas, they don't even have private schools in those areas. They would be voting against their own interests. But Governor Abbott and the MAGA extremists have put a target on those rural Republicans and said, if you don't do this, we're going to get rid of you. It's like we have a gun to your head. Do this or else you will be returning as a state representative. Mind you, most of these members voted 99% with Abbott. They broke with him on that, and he went after them. So you're absolutely right. It would be to their detriment to support it, but many of them are afraid because of what happened this last election cycle. So it's going to be a very close vote. All the Democrats have been against it, and we are going to continue to reach across the aisle to hopefully help our colleagues find the courage. And that's why it's important that the public comes in and makes their voices heard, because again, when we're elected, we're elected to represent the voice of our constituents. And so that is why it's so important that the public weighs in and make their voices heard.
Amen for that.
Amen.
We appreciate you, Representative. And please call in again. We want to hear what's going on. And I don't know if there's a way we can block 30 minutes or an hour for you to do it.
Let's do it to keep the public aware. We don't expect them to know everything. That's why I will be happy to chime in and keep people informed so that they can make their voices heard.
Thank you,
for the platform. I appreciate both of you gentlemen. Have a blessed day.
You too, my friend.
Thank you, sir.
Before we take the next caller, Kambrel, you brought up something. I want to go to another thing, which is you talked about Vietnam.
Mm-hmm.
And you were going to the ROTC, et cetera.
Right.
Did a lot of your friends get drafted? I mean, what was that like? I mean, see, we today, and I grew up sort of just on the hair of the edge. We have no concept of what that sacrifice is or was, and we don't know that feeling of fear of, am I going to get drafted, and go to a war that I don't even know what's going on. I'm going to be halfway around the world, and do I even believe in this? Does the military believe in it? Does the politicians really believe in it? But yet we're going to send people over there to go fight.
It was a big event every year when the draft numbers were chosen. It had these little ping pong balls and a big hoop, and then you pull this number up. That's December 2nd. You pull this number. So you looked at that to see what your draft number was. So, for example, I was born December 17th.
Okay.
So that year, December 17th, was drawn like 260th or something like that. They determined how many people there were going to be. The draft, when they want to get numbers of people, they would say, we're going to call everybody whose draft numbers are 1 through 115.
Because that's when we get enough.
Yeah, you get enough. They would determine how many people are in that pool, and they would get that. And so you would hope, oh, Lord, don't let my number be low. And so every young man once you turn 18, you have to register for the draft. That was just the part of the law. I think you still have to register. But anyway, you had to register. And once you registered, you had to sit back and wait. And hopefully, you maybe hope you get a deferment if you're in college, if you're going to college. But sometimes it didn't work.
God,
so
scary.
Yeah.
I mean, and there, I can just imagine. Do they do it like on TV?
Yeah, it was a televised thing where you could do that. Now, I don't remember the specifics. So you imagine it would take quite a long time to do that, 365 balls. So I don't know if it was on TV or not, that I recall, but I remember seeing the video of it, or film in that case. They would say, this is what the numbers were. You can go online and you can Google draft numbers, and because that's how, when I remember what my draft number is, you go back and look and see the draft numbers for each year.
Wow. And I just can't even imagine. So I can imagine all the family, all the parents, and they're just praying, Lord, not my son.
Right.
I mean, really, not my son. And then here it comes, and thank God. Yeah. Or else it's like tears. You're the first number.
Right.
Oh my God.
And it's not to say that you don't want to be, in favor of defending your country.
Understood.
That's altogether different, because I really wanted to go, and my father and we always talked about the fact that he was looking forward to saluting his son. Mm-hmm. We really wanted to do that, but the challenges were when you have a war going on, which, by the way, one of the video I did with him, he cried twice. And one of the times was when he was thinking about how unfair it was for women in this country. And I was really surprised that he cried about that.
Wow.
He talked about his mother having to work so hard, and how women got paid so much less than men, and that sort of thing. The other time he cried was when he talked about Vietnam, the young men who died in Vietnam in a war that he was just totally against. But as a military guy, you would never hear that, because he was a hardcore military guy. Says, I'm going to do what the officers tell me. The military, you do what you're told, and that's what he did.
War is just bad. No matter where. I mean, when you think about these young people fighting in Ukraine, and it's just what is that song? Is it by Bruce Springsteen? War. Well, it ain't good for it. Absolutely nothing.
It wasn't Bruce Springsteen.
Well,
it was the group was called War, I think.
Okay, but you know what song I'm talking about? War.
Yeah.
Good God. What's it good for? Absolutely nothing. I mean, anyways, you know what I mean. We have another caller. Let's bring in Amy. Is there an Amy there?
Hi.
Hello, Amy. You got me, Gilbert Garcia, with Mr. Kambrel Marshall.
Hi, Amy.
Hi, Mr. Marshall. As somebody who also comes from a family of educators, I was just wondering how you think that influenced your approach to your career and even life.
Even life.
It was for me because I was seeing what was happening to the kids in Arkansas who weren't going to school and they were dropping out. They were doing menial jobs. It was very illustrative to me about because in my family, my mother was brilliant, by the way. She went to Dillard undergrad and went to Atlanta University for a master's. She's brilliant. In our household, the conversation around the table was never whether or not I was going to college. The conversation was where I was going to college.
I mean, that is so important right there.
Yeah, she phrased it. She phrased it that way. So we never, Amy, we never really thought about anything other than. Now I realize now there's so many other things you can do, in terms of education.
A trade.
Absolutely.
I mean, I don't mean to take away from Amy, he is going to come to the answer. I just want to mention one thing because, everybody knows I ran for mayor. And one of the things I talked about was, the cost of education is so expensive. And I said, in our lifetime, we're going to see top colleges costing 6 figures a year. And I thought to myself, well, that's going to be, 10 or 15 years. I just saw the cost of Yale is now going to be over $90,000 next year. And you know what? And it's not just yet, it's everywhere. And so that means we're going to see it like in probably 3 years, 2 years.
So my father, I didn't mean to cut you off, but my father, when I had first had my children, he said, I'm putting $10,000 into this account for each child for their education. So I had no excuse for my children not to be able to think about going to college either. So it really structured everything around me. So whenever there's something on the ballot for me to vote on, maybe adding some more for education or the schools or that sort of thing, I'm always going to be pro-education, pro-teacher, because my life really was founded on that.
Well, going back to Amy's question. So Amy, I know you're still there. So, how did it shape you in your business, in your job as a broadcaster?
I think there's just the attitude of work was because my mother was just hardcore. She was always focused on getting the job done. If the job was first begun, never quit until it's done was always the mantra. And my work ethic in my job was always based upon that, and that you always have to be better. I was always self-conscious about who I was on TV, that someone was looking at me, and I knew that someone was looking at me and thinking maybe I didn't get that job because of my qualifications. And so within my atmosphere of my work, I was working that much harder to make sure that I was going to be good at what I did, hopefully.
I mean, broadcasting is so competitive. They're not going to bring you on unless you're good.
Well, my first boss told me that. My first boss told me, he says, you know what? We are in an environment where we don't have anybody on our air who's black. And we don't have anybody on the air who's Hispanic. And so we're putting out this thing. We want to get somebody who may fit that qualification. But let me tell you something. He said, if you can't do this job well, and this is a quote from him, he said, your black ass is going to be out. This is what he told me. And his name was Bill Close. Never will forget him. Double amputee, but also the news director and the anchor. And he was a hard guy. He was a strict grammarian who made sure that I, my words and everything. But he told me that from the very beginning. So from that point on, I always had this in the back of my mind. Somebody's thinking that I may not have this job because of my ability.
It goes back to what I said about our firm. You got to be better than. You have to work harder than. Amy, thank you so much for calling in.
Thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome. We got 2 other callers here. I do want to say a few things about Mayor Turner, though, before the show's over, because he was quite a human being and he was quite a legislator, very skilled a public servant. Let's come back. We have, who was that name again, Miss Producer? Who was the name? I missed it. Dominic. Hey, Dominic. Dominic, are you there, pal? Dominic. Dominic, you got me or no?
No.
Okay, let's go to the next caller. There was another caller I saw. I didn't see the name, but I know there's another one.
Okay, time for you.
Hold on, Houston. We're coming. Who's that, Miss Producer? Who's that name?
Dominic.
Okay, is Dominic, are you there? Or who's the name after that?
You got Dominic?
It's coming.
What's the next name? Let's go to the next one. Okay, we're going to keep going. Jordan, are you there? Jordan. All right, we'll come back. We're having some technical difficulties.
We call that technical difficulties.
There you go. Let's come back to something because, when you think about Sylvester Turner, The one thing I always think about, and everyone knows that, you know, he and I didn't agree on everything, but what we did agree on for sure was he always fought for Houston. Yeah. I mean, that guy was everywhere as an advocate for Houston. And the one thing I think about is his big grin. You know what I mean? He always had a smile and he always had a big grin. I don't think he's ever met a stranger, and I think he just always felt good and just loved every moment of life. Yeah. That's the way he was.
I think that you're right about that, that you could disagree with him on policy, but you never disagree with his heart and where he was. I first met, as Representative Reynolds mentioned, we're both members of the Church Without Walls, so I saw him at church on a regular basis. And from that, when he was running for other positions and stuff, as a journalist, I needed to interview him. Yep. And he knew that I have to ask him questions that are going to be maybe not comfortable for him, but I got to ask the questions.
That's right.
But I remember seeing him on the campaign trail, and even after the campaign trail, he was just always, he was everywhere.
Yes,
he's everywhere.
There's like 3 of him.
I know. When you look at the social media now, I look at all these people with pictures of him, and I said, well, I had a whole lot of pictures, but now I see all these other people with all these pictures. It wasn't just me.
You mean you thought you were special?
I thought I was special. He's with everybody, but
he really was.
I saw him, and I'd say, slow down. I'd see him, I'd see him in different events, and I'd say, I love you. And he'd say, I love you too, man. We had that kind of relationship where it just was special. And I remember when my grandson came into town, and I said, I wanted to make sure that he would be able to meet people who could maybe influence him in some kind of way. So, have him come down. I had him come down to the mayor's office, sit in the mayor's chair, all that kind of stuff. He didn't have to do that.
What a great thing. What a great thing. I remember there were 2 things, and I don't remember where we were at a school. And then another thing, he was at on a stage of something, and there's music going on. And you know what? The mayor had moves. Dancing. He had good moves. And I remember thinking when I first saw him, like, holy cow, is that Mayor Turner? I'm like, he's got some good moves.
He did a Dancing with the Stars Houston version one time. Yeah, for some, I forget one event. It was some nonprofit that had this event, and they had a Dancing with the Stars kind of thing. And he was out there doing his thing.
I mean, he just, the beautiful thing about that is, some people would say, oh, well, I don't want to, I'll feel goofy and someone's going to, not him. I mean, he just didn't care what he looked like. He just wanted to be there. And you know what? You knew he was having a ball.
Having a good time.
He was having a good time. Let's hold that thought. We're going to have more about Sylvester Turner in a second. Is Dominic there? Let's get Dominic back. Dominic.
Okay, got me?
We got you. You got me and Kambrel. What you got, pal?
Good morning.
Okay, number one, I texted this earlier. But I think one thing Houston needs to look at, and I think Sheila Jackson Lee was trying to get pardons for the Afro-American soldiers that rioted during the Logan race riot. Mm-hmm. Camp Logan is now Memorial Park. And there was a streetcar line, which is the early, we would call that probably today light rail, out to Memorial Park. And at the time, there was a Jim Crow laws. You had to stay behind the line. The same thing that occurred to Rosa Parks type of thing. And these guys were so upset. They were from the North. They didn't understand this. And there was a great big military riot that these guys had been serving for their country, and they can't get on a streetcar. And it was a big riot, and they went from basically Memorial Park, and the riot went down almost to today the Astrodome.
Wow!
And I think this is something that needs to be brought up. Yep. As part of our history in Houston, and we have to accept it. And second of all,
you know what? On that, Dominic, I think that is such a good topic. I think I need to make that a show. I got to find a professor or something that really knows it well. I think I saw a special on it, and I was amazed. Say it again.
11 had one.
Okay, because I did not know that history, and it was amazing history. Oh, Kambrel, you want to add something?
Yeah, the Buffalo Soldiers Museum is a good source of that.
Okay,
because they have information about that, and I was a part of a panel discussion where they were trying to get pardons posthumously for many of the people who were involved in that who were hung. There were people who were hung because of their involvement in that riot. And so they're buried down in the San Antonio area in a cemetery. They would not put them in the regular cemetery. They put them in a black section. And so there's been a move afoot to do that. And I think there were some things that have happened recently. They had a video or picture from the Buffalo Soldier Museum and from the people. The Memorial Park Conservancy was involved with that as well to try to make sure they could get justice for these people after the fact. So it's underway, and I think they've already done some things. I have to look that up, but I'm sure that they've already done some. I'm
gonna get them on. Dominic, thank you for that. But go ahead.
Can I say one other thing?
Yeah.
I think too with education. Marshall, you had to be in STEM to be a meteorologist. That is understandable. But we have some great scientists here in Houston. I'm thinking about Dr. Cheney, Terrence Fontaine at SMU. And also Carol Lewis. And then we have also, she's more into math, but we got Carl Wyatt, who's the head of the Harris County finances. And my thing is, why maybe I don't know this. If I'm ignorant, please let me know. But I think within the African American community and also the Hispanic community, to tell young people, male and female also, it's okay to be in science. It's okay to be in math. And you can still be within your ethnicity. There's nothing wrong with going into this. And I think that would be also another way to bring young people out of poverty and be great citizens and move people forward. I'm sending it back to you.
Yeah, it's all about exposure. That's what it's all about. And so there are many organizations that have focused on making sure that STEM type kind of programs are available in communities where they don't normally have it available. Want to get kids to understand that you can do things other than playing basketball in some communities and make sure that education generally is the key that's going to open the door that's going to get you someplace.
Look at my family. My parents didn't know anything, and all they knew was the key to success. The first thing was, we'll be a doctor. Yeah. That's all they knew. And of course, I was going to be, I went to pre-med at Yale, and I don't like blood. I get sick of the sight of blood, and I found that out. So then that was out. So then the next thing my parents wanted me to be was to be a lawyer. But I don't really like to read or write, and so I'm like, that's out. And it wasn't until I had a summer internship through a program called SEO that puts undergrads of color on Wall Street, and the reason makes perfect sense because a lot of us do not have parents that have in that business. A lot of us, the proximity isn't near Wall Street, isn't there near New York. As I mentioned, I'm my parents' retirement. And so it's about giving us exposure. And that changed my whole life right there.
And that's an understanding of why you feel the way you do about the DEI programs, which all they do is give the exposure to other Gilbert Garcias to be able to do something they may not otherwise been able to do.
That's right. I still had to work hard, all those things. But the point is, I didn't even know it existed.
Yeah.
Let's hold that thought. We have a Jordan. Is there a Jordan on there or Robert? Jordan, I think. Jordan, are you there? Jordan, hit me. Is there Robert there?
No, Jordan.
Jordan, Robert, either one of y'all. You're on. You're on.
Hello.
Come on down, as they say. We're going to keep going. We're going to keep going. The one thing I want to do, I don't know if we can zoom in here, Mr. Producer. Mr. Producer, if you could. I want to make sure we zoom in on this young, handsome man right here.
Oh, you don't have to zoom in. That's ugly enough.
No. Look. This, how long ago was this?
That was 1978, I think.
And this is when you were in Arizona?
Yeah, I was at my first job in Phoenix, Arizona.
Were you nervous?
I probably was.
I mean, to be on TV and everything.
Initially, yeah. It was frightening. Oh, absolutely.
Right? I mean,
frightening. Absolutely.
And were you like all worried about? I mean, how do I look and how am I standing? And
the first job that I got. I was still a student. I was a student at Arizona State, and I was a weekend sportscaster.
Yep.
This particular picture, I was already. I think I was either the main guy there, or maybe maybe one of my weekend shows. But I was a student and I was young, and so
what an experience!
I know,
and what an opportunity as a young man to be on TV. And then, of course, let's see if we can zoom in on this one. Now, this is another young, handsome man. And of course, this was when you first came to Houston, right?
I think it was right around that time. Yeah, I was wearing my glasses, I think, at that point. So who knows what I was doing there.
And when you first came to Houston, how did Houston accept you? I mean, was it like
unbelievable?
Was it wonderful?
Unbelievable. Yeah. It was amazing. It was everything that we had ever hoped for. We could never ask for anything better.
For you and your wife and family?
And my wife, we moved in, and the people in the community were coming by, bringing food by and stuff like that.
That's so wonderful.
But that's just such a Southern experience, kind of like warmth type thing. I was in Miami, which I came here from Miami. I had been in my house. We moved in our house in 1986 in Miami. It wasn't until 1992 that I met the neighbors behind me because the fence was blown down by Hurricane Andrew. My next door neighbor we knew, my neighbor across the street, but it wasn't that kind of congeniality that we have here in this area. And
very interesting.
It was just amazing.
Well, let me ask you this: when did you get your show, Newsmakers? That's such an important show. You started doing that show. Yeah. You would interview everybody, leaders, or just community activists. You've interviewed me a couple times. It's such a great show.
I love it.
When did you get that?
That was Jerry Martin, our former general manager. Jerry Martin came in. We had a program on that was on Sunday mornings at 5:30. A very talented young woman, Kim Davis, was doing that program. And Jerry came in and he said, well, okay, but I want somebody doing that show who people know, who is, because Kim was a producer. She wasn't an on-air person, but very talented. And he said, I want you to do that show. And I said, okay. And so we changed the name. It was called Beyond the Headlines at that point in time. He said, let's change the name. We came up with, Houston Newsmakers. We used to have a show called Houston Newsmakers, but that was then Bill Baeza hosted it. Yep. Dan Patrick was on that show. Sonny Messiah Giles, the Houston Defender, was on that show, and it was produced by another woman there. And Bill did the program. It was like 3 people always coming on there, but it had gone away. And so the general manager said, we want to do this program, and so we'll call it Houston Newsmakers with Kambrel Marshall. I said, well, I'm not going to fight that.
Yeah, so it's wonderful.
Yeah, so we started doing that program, and it evolved through the years. It evolved. Once upon a time, it was like we had people coming on who were like at each other's throats and stuff like that. But I felt like we could do something more informative if I could just bring somebody on and ask them the questions, sometimes uncomfortable questions for them to deal with, but at least I have people going at and fighting each other on the air. And
this isn't meant to be like what was it, firing line or one of those. Well, let me ask you this: when did you start that? Do you remember?
I don't remember the day. I don't know.
But it was several
about
years.
10 years ago.
Yeah. Well, that was such a first-class show.
I enjoyed that.
Are they keeping it up? I don't even know. I didn't think so.
No,
they need to.
One of the biggest disappointments was that when I left, they decided just not to continue the show.
That was a good public service.
And I'm not sure why. Yeah, I'm not sure why they decided not to do it. I think it has to do with numbers, with number of people. That because I was a one-man show. I mean, I was the interviewer. Right. I called and made the appointments. I called Gilbert Garcia and said, can you come on the program? I produced it. I edited it, so I did all of that. And I think that they felt if they're going to continue the show, they have to have somebody who's going to do the performance part and somebody else is going to write it and somebody else is going to edit it. So they didn't want to do that.
Wow. What a pity, because that's such a good show. We have another caller. Is there a Bobby on the line? Bobby, what do you got there? You got Gilbert Garcia, a tip from me with Mr. Kambrel Marshall. We're going down memory lane. What do you got?
Gilbert, I don't want to come across like a Patty Pico, but get one of you said, well, what is it good for? Well, get one of if I was part of the industrial military complex, man, I would disagree. So I went to Vietnam in 1965 and had no clue. All I knew, I got an extra $50 a month. But hey, man, so.
Well, we thank you for your service.
Well, thank you, Gilbert. But industrial military complex. Bye.
Thank you, my friend. We appreciate you calling in, Bobby. Yeah. But coming back for a second on Sylvester Turner, it's going to be hard to replace the institutional knowledge that he had when you really think about it. And of course, there's always going to be another someone, and that person will have 20 years. But when you have two icons like Sheila Jackson Lee and Sylvester Turner at the same time,
Right.
that's a huge void of knowledge, tenure. I mean, that's a big hole.
It is. It's going to be interesting to see how that evolves, who emerges. I know that Amanda Edwards was one of the people who was really on
She's
the front.
great.
She's great. I'm personally, I think she'd be fabulous to be able to do that. I mean, she ran I had her on the program on the Houston Newsmakers when she decided she was going to run for Congress. And I asked her, had she talked to Congresswoman Jackson Lee about that? Because Congresswoman Jackson Lee decided to run for mayor. And I said, I know that you wouldn't do this unless you, talk to her about it. And she said, we had a conversation about it. I said, well, did she give you a blessing? She didn't really say that.
Yeah.
But, I think that the only reason she ran was because she knew Sheila was not going to run. And then once Sheila got back in the race, it became, the people voted for Sheila and she won. But then when it came time for Sylvester to want to jump in after Congresswoman Jackson Lee died, then it became something else with the precinct chair being responsible for doing it. And even with that, Amanda lost by just a little bit. Yeah. And so I think you would have to think if somebody was going to say a front runner, if she so desires, and I think she still desires to do that because she's still been a lot of things in the community, continues to do that. She's a smart woman, and she may be the person that would seem to be the best fit for now. But who knows?
She'd be good no matter what. There may be other people that could be good too, but she'd be good. She'd be great.
I think.
Let's face it. She's got the youth. She's got the energy. She's lovely. She's smart. She's brilliant. She's all that.
She didn't go to the same school you went to, but you're not gonna hold that Harvard education against her.
She went to Harvard. Harvard. They all say it like that. I think we still got a couple. God, can you believe we're almost out of time?
We said this beginning. We always run out of time.
I got to have you again already. Is there another caller? Or no. Well, we're having all kinds of phone issues. I know we lost Jordan, and I think we lost somebody else. But at the end of the day, call in. Y'all know who to call in.
Yeah.
Who? I'm sorry. Say that again.
Brother Chris.
Brother Chris, are you there?
Sir. Yes, sir. Good morning.
Brother Chris, you got me, Gilbert Garcia, and Mr. Kambrel Marshall. What say you, Brother Chris?
This is what Brother Chris said. First, my condolences go out to Sylvester Turner's family, the late great congressman. He also was a friend of mine. And second, I would say good morning to Mr. Kambrel Marshall, the legend, KPRC. But one thing I will make perfectly clear to everybody that's listening. Any elected seat out here belongs to the people. Just because a certain candidate may seem like the best candidate, we can't say that just yet. I know you just mentioned something about a man, that's fine. You got another list of candidates, particular candidates who just qualified. So we don't want to jump the gun too soon. And second, if I'm ever going to run for a seat, I think any political candidate such as Gilbert, you don't need any other person out here permission to run for a seat. They have your name put on the ballot. And let the people decide what they want to go for.
Amen.
Yeah.
I'm not going to go to any elected official say, well, can I run for your seat? Because it don't work that way. If I want the seat, they got to do a better job. I'm just that. Others have done it and stood on that.
Yeah.
So we almost get confused by who it belongs. It belongs to the people, and the people decide who they want in that seat. Am I making sense? Or maybe just me?
Yeah.
No, Brother Chris, you got it going on.
No, that's true.
And I think, listen, we both 100% agree with you. I think we were just commenting on, she's worked hard, et cetera. But no, I totally agree with you. I think it's wide open.
They do a lot behind the scene that don't get recognized. So we just got to put a amount of efforts out there like that. We got others as well who just as qualified, who's not jockeying for cameras and who haven't been on newsmakers yet. They do it behind the scenes quietly with the people.
Yeah,
but when the people lead, the politician will follow.
Yeah.
So we just have to put a man out there because maybe she's qualified fine, but there's others also just as qualified.
Well, Brother Chris, when you see people out there that are thinking about it, you tell them to call into the show. Let's give them some exposure.
I take my hat off to anybody who wants to even try to run for political office. And I told you that when you ran for office. It's a testament to somebody who wants to go out and represent the people, and the people are the ones who have to be the ones who decide on who that's going to be representing them. But the person who does that, they're just making themselves vulnerable to the community. And they want to do that. Hopefully they're doing it for the reasons that are important. That is, they want to represent the people. They're not trying to do it for the purposes of self-aggrandizement. They're just trying to do it to represent the people. And people will get a sense of who's genuine and who's not.
I think
so. We can talk about whoever we want to talk about here. The people who are going to be voting, they'll be able to determine, okay, who's genuine, who's not, and we're going to vote for that person or not.
I think when people are out there campaigning and they're going to different groups, I think I have faith in the people that they'll figure it out. Brother Chris, we're running out of time. Call in next week, will you, my friend? We want to hear more about what you got.
Good candidate. You got Darby Johnson. You know, you have probably brother Derek Muhammad. You have Jelanda Jones. Let's just name everybody. Just not just name a man there. We got potential good candidates who just as qualified and just as educated.
Yeah.
Brother Chris, you put the word out. They're welcome to call my show. I'm going to have to cut you off only because. Thank you, Brother Chris. Always. I can't believe it. We have 1 minute, Milk. Kambrel, that camera right there is yours. Tell Houston, number one, right there that thank you for all the memories, this and that. Tell them that you love them. And by the way, you ain't going anywhere.
Oh, no.
You're not going anywhere. In fact, you're probably busier now than you were when you were working. Go ahead.
A lot of projects working on, including the African American Memorial down in Fort Bend County right now as well. We're raising money for the Conservancy for that. A lot of other nonprofit organizations I'm involved with. This community has been so amazing to me and my family. There's no way I'm not going to be a part of it going forward. So thank you for inviting me to come on down. I appreciate it.
Very good. I think we have probably 30 seconds. So let's key up that commercial. And Houston, we will see you next time. This is Gilbert Andrew Garcia. Listen to my radio show, A Tip from Gilbert. Talk, inspiration, and prayer every Monday from 11 a.m. till noon on Houston's gospel leader, KWWJ. 1360 AM and streaming live on kwwj.org. Listen on the legendary KYOK 1140 AM and streaming live on kyokradio.org. KCOH 1380 AM on Sandgeek Radio 95.1 FM 1460 AM and Aliento Radio 101.7 FM and 1540 AM. Call in at 832-570-8075 and follow me on social media. See you then.